Today I'm showing you 7 soup recipes for every day of the week. This is gonna be good. Today I'm going to show you how I make crock pot or slow cooker potato soup. I'm starting with a little over 2 pounds of gold potatoes, an 8-ounce block of cream cheese. Here I have a 14.5-ounce can of chicken broth. I'm also going to be using 1 tablespoon of dehydrated chopped onions. You could use 1 small fresh onion. Here I have a 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika and a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. Some salt and pepper is going to go in. And here I've already peeled and cut my potatoes into chunks. So I'm adding it to a 4-quart crock pot, or this is a 4.5. I'm also going to start with a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. If it needs salt later, I'll add it after everything is cooked. So I'm going to add my onions, and here I have my dry seasonings and spices going in, and the ratios of those, you can add more if you like. I'm also going to pour in my can of chicken broth, add the block of cream cheese, and this was sitting on my counter so it's not super cold. I'm also going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. If you're using already fine ground pepper, then a 1/4 teaspoon works. Cover with a lid and set your slow cooker to high, and I'm going to let this go for about 4 hours on high. If you're doing this on low, it's going to be about 8 hours. Here I have a pound of chopped bacon, and I'm just going to cook this in a cold pan. And actually, in the comment section in other videos, when I cook bacon, someone mentioned to add water first, boil the bacon, then crisp it up and brown it. Apparently that method will help yield more bacon fat, so that's what I'm going to try today. I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of water into my chopped bacon, and then just let that come up to a boil. And it's going to go from this to this, and after it boils and the water evaporates, it goes to this and it starts to fry, and that's when you want to start moving it around and crisping up the bacon. So here my bacon is cooked, and in my opinion, this did yield a lot of bacon fat or grease. So I'm going to reserve this for soft flour tortillas tomorrow. It has been 3.5 hours, so I'm going to check the potatoes to see if they are cooked through. And you'll want them to be fork tender. And I actually like it when you can kind of mash them easily with the fork. That's great. So what I'm going to do now is just take a metal whisk and kind of mash and mix the cream cheese and mix around the potatoes. I like to leave some chunky, and I like to make them kind of smooth and creamy, like a combination of textures, but that is definitely up to you. You can make it all creamy if you like. Okay, so I'm going to cover this back up and let it go for another 20 minutes, and then it's done. For the toppings, I'm going to add shredded cheddar cheese. I have my bacon already cooked and chopped. I will also be garnishing with dried parsley and dried chives. Definitely go with fresh if you've got that, but this is what I'm working with today. And I will be adding some cracked black pepper. Here I have some red pepper flakes, the crushed red pepper flakes. I love that, and sour cream. Now you can definitely add a little bit of sour cream, some of the chopped bacon and cheddar cheese into this soup, but I just like to garnish with it and let everyone add what they like. But you definitely can add it into the crock pot. It's very tasty that way. I also want to mention, if you find the viscosity of the soup to be too thick, you can add a little bit of broth or some whole milk into the mix until you get the right consistency. This is perfect in my opinion. And if you find it too thin, you definitely can add some sour cream and add some of the cheese. That'll help to thicken it up. Now that fall is upon us, I definitely will be making a lot more soups and baking, and I still love to make crock pot dinners. So this is a crock pot 1-bowl dinner. It's very hearty and filling. But if you want a side salad to get extra greens on the side with your meal, you can do that as well. This slow cooker potato soup, anyone can make. It's so easy and convenient. So up next, I'm going to show you how I make a broccoli cheddar cheese soup. Here we go. Here I'm starting with a pound of fresh broccoli florets. You could also use frozen broccoli. I'm going to be using three 14.5 ounce cans. These are 3 cans of chicken broth. Here I have 1 cup of heavy cream. I'm going to start off by sauteing 1 small shallot, 3 cloves of garlic. I have 4 tablespoons of butter, a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. This is going to make a roux, and I will be using around 12 to 14 ounces of shredded cheese. I have a combination of sharp cheddar cheese and pepper jack cheese because I had a small portion of pepper jack to use. I didn't have enough cheese. I'm also adding a 1/2 cup, maybe a little more extra, of freshly grated Parmesan cheese. I will be adding salt, pepper, a little bit of seasonings and spices, and I'm going to make some soup. Here I have a pot preheating over a medium to medium-high heat, and to that I'm going to add my chopped shallot. This was just a small shallot that I finely chopped. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. I'm going to go in with my garlic. Now for the butter. I'm going to let that melt down. And I've lowered the heat. I don't want this too high or too hot, so I put it onto a medium heat setting on my stove here, my burner. So now I'm going in with my 1/4 cup of flour. We're going in with just a little bit of onion powder. I'll say that's optional. 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. Some black pepper, just a little dash, and some paprika. I'd say a 1/4 teaspoon of each. Give that a mix. I'm going in with my chicken broth. And just continually mix and stir as you add it in. Once this is combined well, I'm going to crank up the heat back to a medium to medium-high heat. I want this to sort of simmer here. Now I'm adding in my broccoli. Salt. The lid. Let it simmer for about 15 minutes. Now remember, I'm working with fresh broccoli, so it will release some more of that water content, but once the 15 minutes is up, after it starts to simmer, I may add a little more liquid to it. Okay, so this has simmered for somewhere between like 10 and 12 minutes. I didn't take it the full 15, but you know, do what you must do. And I don't think it needs any extra liquid in this. I think this is good. So now for the 1 cup of heavy cream, going right in. Gonna give that a mix. Gonna crank up the heat just a little, not too much. Now go in with your cheeses. 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Once this gently melts down and combines and just becomes creamy and smooth, I'll taste it for salt or seasoning, and I suggest you do the same and adjust it to your preference. So over a medium-low heat, I'm gonna let this gently simmer for another 10 minutes or until everything is combined and creamy. Okay, so the soup is done. Now you could take a cup or so of the soup, run it through a puree or a blender, pour it back into the pot, give it a mix. That does kind of give you more body and viscosity to the soup, but it has thickened enough in my opinion. I chopped the florets small, so I'm gonna go with it. I'm going to make a Panera style broccoli cheese soup bread bowl for my husband and son to share. They're super excited, so I'm gonna do that. By the way, you definitely can serve this in a bowl and use the bread to make croutons to garnish on top. It all works. It's so good and comforting. Today I'm making a hearty beef and vegetable soup. Plus I'm going to make an easy, delicious cornbread to go right along with the soup. This is gonna be good. For the ingredients, I'm working with 1 pound of lean ground beef. Here I have a 10-ounce bag of frozen mixed vegetables. Well, these are semi-frozen. I will also be using 3 cans of beef broth. These are 14.5-ounce cans that I'm working with. Here is a can of crushed tomatoes. You could also use 8 ounces of tomato sauce. I'm going for 15 ounces of crushed tomato. Here I have around 4 medium gold potatoes. It's around 275 grams of potatoes. A celery stick, half of a small onion. Here I have 2 cloves of garlic minced. I'll be also adding a bay leaf, salt and pepper to taste. Here in a preheated pot, I am going to add around 1.5 tablespoons of cooking oil, and I'm going to saute my celery and onion. I'm also going to add a pinch of salt. This will help to expedite the saute process. The onion should be aromatic along with the celery, and they should be softened. So it's going to take about 5 minutes. Here I have my ground beef ready to go, so it's going into the pan. And I'm just going to break that apart. Some of you might have those kitchen utensils that helps to break apart ground beef. Those come in handy. Here I'm going to add like a teaspoon of salt. You can start with a half teaspoon. I just go for a full teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to continue to break it apart, cook it, and brown. At this point, my ground beef is done. It's cooked through, broken apart, and browned. So now what I'm going to do is create a space in the center and add my diced potatoes. And I'm going to saute this for another 5 minutes or so. Now I'm going to add my minced garlic and that dried bay leaf. And I'm just going to continue the saute and make sure you don't burn the garlic, so it's going to be quick. Now I'm going to add my can of crushed tomatoes. And like I stated earlier, an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce also works. I'm just going to combine this with all of the ingredients in the pot, and you kind of want to cook the crushed tomatoes a little bit. And then I'm going to add my beef broth. I'm going in with the last can. And what I'm going to do is stir and mix this, and you want to pick up any fond at the bottom of the pot. That's going to add flavor, and it's going to add some color to this soup. Here are my mixed vegetables, and they're cold, but they're not frozen. They've been sitting on the countertop, and I'm just going to add this right into the pot with everything else. I'm going to combine this well. And for those of you that like extra seasoning, spices, or even if you want to add more veggies into the mix, do so. Sometimes I add zucchini and cabbage. So I'm going to cover this with a lid and bring it up to a gentle boil. Here it's boiling already, so I'm going to leave the lid offset, but I'm going to lower the heat and let it simmer and cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. For the cornbread, I'm working with Jiffy corn muffin mix. You can definitely do a scratch-made cornbread. I do that all the time, but I'm going for easy today. So 1 box of store-bought cornbread mix, and now I'm going to add some pickled jalapenos. I didn't even measure, maybe a tablespoon or 2 of chopped pickled jalapenos. And here I have about 5 to 6 ounces of black pepper smoked white cheddar. You could use sharp cheddar cheese, Colby Jack cheese, And the amount is really up to you. That's what I'm working with today. And this is actually my favorite cheese. It's a black pepper smoky cheddar. I'm going to go in with 1 egg. And I'm just going to add buttermilk in place of the milk that goes into this box mix. And I'm just going to give that a really good mix. I didn't measure the buttermilk, but the instructions call for a 1/3 cup of whole milk or regular milk. With buttermilk, it is thicker, so you might need to add a little more. And I'm just adding it until the batter comes together. I also want to mention, I think Jiffy corn muffin mix is already sweet, but sometimes there are those of you that like it sweeter, so add more sugar if you like. So in a buttered cast iron skillet, or you can use a buttered 8-inch cake pan, I'm going to add all of the batter. And I preheated my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to bake this until it is done. Somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes. Should do the trick. At this point, my soup is ready. My kitchen smells amazing, by the way. And so I will shut off the heat, but I do suggest you tasting for salt, pepper, and seasoning and adjust to your preference. Also, you want to make sure the potatoes are cooked through and tender. And then it's time to serve. You can shut off the heat. By the way, you want to remove that bay leaf. My cornbread is ready and everything is hot and ready to serve. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to carefully remove this from the oven and I'm going to place it on the countertop. And like I stated earlier, use your favorite homemade from scratch cornbread recipe. That also works. I was just going for easy. So I'm going to take a little bit of softened butter and I'm just going to spread that all over the top. And this pan holds residual heat very well, so you can kind of hear it sizzle as it hits the edge of the pan. But this cornbread is so good and it's so simple to make. The combination of the pickled jalapenos and that smoky cheddar is just perfect with this meal. Now it's time to serve a bowl. And this is dinner. A hearty beef vegetable soup. Like I said, the vegetables are up to you. Sometimes I like to add zucchini and cabbage into the mix. And I like to make a big pot and sometimes meal prep this for the week. It's really good. And now I definitely need a slice of this cornbread. It is hot, but that's okay because everyone is ready to eat as usual and they want a bite. And the cornbread was easy because I used store-bought Jiffy corn muffin mix, but you definitely can make yours from scratch. I do that as well, and it's even better. And I want to show you what the inside of this cornbread looks like. It's so soft and fluffy with that buttermilk in place of the whole milk. So good. The combination of soup and cornbread makes a wonderful meal. Let me show you how to make my son's favorite lunch, or one of his favorite lunches, roasted tomato soup with grilled cheese. Perfect for dunking. You gotta try it. To start, I'm going to prep a baking sheet with oil and parchment paper. Adding the oil first and sticking the parchment paper helps to keep it down. Now I'm going to add a variety of tomatoes. You could use the combination of fresh tomatoes that you prefer. These are what I had. It's around 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. These are Campari and Sugar Bomb tomatoes, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so I'm also going to add 1 shallot that I cut in half. And I'm also going to add 2 cloves of garlic. The amounts are up to you. Now I'm going to add like a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add a little more cooking oil. I'm using avocado oil. Mix it and pop it into a preheated oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit and let it roast for about 20 minutes. And all of these should be roasted, a little bit of charring, and a lot of the juice has released. I'm going to carefully remove all of the stems from the tomatoes. And now I'm going to carefully lift the parchment paper with all the liquid and tomatoes carefully, and I'm just going to pour it right into my blender cup. These tomatoes are really juicy, but if you want extra liquid, add some chicken broth. So now I'm going to season with salt, a little bit of dried thyme, a little shake of dried basil leaves. Again, the amount is up to you. Here I'm going to add just a pinch of crushed red pepper flakes. And I love to add smoked paprika. Again, just a couple of dashes. Here I'm going to add some cracked black pepper. Sometimes I like to add a little pinch of chicken bouillon powder. Again, it's up to you. Now blend. Once it has pureed well, you can serve. It's as easy as that, and it's so good. I already have my grilled cheese almost done, and my kids are hungry. So here's the plate, and a trick to putting a glass bowl on a glass plate, I put a wet little paper towel underneath. That keeps it from sliding everywhere. But going in. Going in. Double dipping. So good. You gotta try it. Okay, so next up, I'm gonna show you how to make Italian wedding soup. To start with this Italian wedding soup, or you may call it married soup, which is actually what it translates to in Italian. I'm making a small pot today just for lunch. It'll serve 2 to 3 people. I'm working with, this is 8 ounces of lean ground beef, or minced beef, some of you might call it. I'm going to start adding my ingredients to make the meatballs. Here I'm working with a tablespoon of fresh chopped parsley, 2 tablespoons of breadcrumbs. These are just plain breadcrumbs. I'm going to add just a little bit. This is rehydrated minced onion, dried minced onion. I'm going to go in with just half this amount. This is crushed, this is garlic paste, like a half teaspoon. 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese going in, some cracked black pepper, and some salt. I'd say like a 1/4 teaspoon. I am going to scramble here, or beat 1 large egg. So it's going to be kind of difficult here. 1 tablespoon going in, and reserve the rest. Now with my clean hands, I'm going to combine all of the beef with the ingredients. And then we're going to make little meatballs, little tiny meatballs to go into the soup. Okay, so I'm going to take just a little bit of my beef mixture here and make these little meatballs. If I had to guess, it's like 2 teaspoons, a teaspoon and a half to 2 teaspoons of your ground beef mixture. And this is my little meatball. And I'm just going to repeat the process for the rest of my beef mixture. So cute. Okay, so here are my little cute meatballs. These are actually still really cold, so I'm just going to cover them and let them hang out on the countertop until I need them. But if you have other things to do, cover them with cling film, place them in the fridge, and before you use them, you want to take them out 10 to 15 minutes before you're going to put them into the soup to take the chill off of the meat. It really does help with cooking consistency. So anyways, I'm going to wrap these up and let them hang out until I need them. In a preheated pot, this is a heavy bottom pot. It's small. It's not a large pot because I'm just making a small batch of Italian wedding soup today. I've added some olive oil. I'm going to let that preheat just a little bit. Should be okay. I'm going to go in with, this is half of a very small onion. And I'm going to add half of a medium carrot that I chopped and diced. And half of a celery stick. that I diced. Going with a pinch of salt, and I'm going to saute well. Once everything is sauteed and translucent, I'm going to go in with some garlic. You can go with like minced garlic. I have this crushed garlic paste. I'm going to quickly mix that in. I don't want to burn it. I do want it to become fragrant and aromatic with the rest of the ingredients. Now I'm going in with 2 tablespoons, actually this is more like, 2 tablespoons of white wine. Oh, it smells wonderful. You can skip the white wine and just go with all of the broth, but I really think it adds wonderful depth of flavor to the broth. It just brightens it. So now, I'm going to go in with, I'm going to start with 5 cups of low sodium chicken broth. And 1 more. I think I'm going to add in this pot, I think I can go for 6 cups of broth. I'm just going to add a cup of water. There we go. But 6 cups of low sodium chicken broth works for this. I'm going to cover this just for a little bit to bring it up to a boil, a gentle boil. You'll want to taste your broth for salt or seasoning, so I'm going to add some salt. And salt is to your taste. Now you don't want to over salt this or add too much saltiness, because I will be adding that egg Parmesan cheese mixture, and the meatballs are salted, but another pinch for me. Give that a taste and it'll be good. Now it's time to add our meatballs. Okay, this is boiling, going in to poach the meatballs. The 8 ounces of lean ground beef that I worked with will definitely give you somewhere between 35 to 40 mini meatballs. But it's really up to your choice what size. I'm going to make sure that there we go. Okay, gonna gently stir that, and once they start to float to the top, I'm gonna add my pasta. I'm gonna give this like 5 to 7 minutes, should do the trick before I add the pasta. It has been around 5 to 7 minutes, and as you can see, they are floating to the top, which is great. So what I'm going to do next is add my orzo pasta. Typically, I think it's the small pearl pastas that goes into the married soup, Italian wedding soup, but this is the smallest pasta I could find at my grocery store. So it's going in. Gonna give that a stir, and I'm going to let this come back up to a boil, which it won't take long, and I'm going to cook this for another 5 to 7 minutes before I add the last 2 ingredients. I want to show you what I'm going to do with the rest of that egg. So I'm going to take a tablespoon of grated Parmesan cheese into my egg, and I'll just use this. I'll give it a mix. And I'm going to drizzle this into the boiling broth towards the end. And that's what I'm going to do. I wonder, you know what? I think I can add another tablespoon. So 2 tablespoons of the Parmesan, grated Parmesan cheese. Perfect. There we go. Okay, so it's been 7 minutes. The pasta should be at least al dente. Okay, so now I'm going to just stir and drizzle in my egg Parmesan cheese mixture. There we go. It's not going to take that long to cook, and I'll say that's optional. Some people don't like that, but I do. The egg Parmesan cheese mixture, you don't have to do that. Now I'm going in with my fresh escarole. You could substitute escarole with baby spinach. I do that as well, or just a green leafy, something that will go well in this soup. I'm going to let this simmer for another 2 to 3 minutes, and it's time to serve. And that's how I make Italian wedding soup. It's really good. Okay, so this was one type of soup with meatballs, but here's another one I like to make. Today I'm going to show you how to make caldo de albóndigas, which is a Mexican meatball soup with vegetables. This is going to be good. So first, I'm going to start by making my meatballs. Here in a bowl, I'm going to be using 1 pound of lean ground beef. To that, I'm going to add around a ½ teaspoon of granulated onion powder, a ½ teaspoon of granulated garlic powder. Here, I'm going to add some cracked black pepper, like a ½ teaspoon. I'm also going to be adding a teaspoon of salt. And here I have a ½ cup of rinsed uncooked rice. I rinsed this in cold water, and now I'm putting it into the ground beef mixture with my clean hands or a gloved hand. I'm going to give that a mix. So recently I was at a nursery shopping for plants, and I ran into longtime subscribers of Simply Mama Cooks, and they requested albóndigas. So here we go. I'm also going to add 1 large egg into the mix. And I've seen recipes where some people add breadcrumbs. I sometimes add fresh cilantro. I'm leaving it out of the meatballs today, but you can definitely add that. And be sure to season how you prefer. Sometimes I use fresh garlic instead of the powdered garlic, but I went with something easy today. Okay, so I have a baking sheet. I'm going to add some parchment paper onto the baking sheet, and I'm going to start portioning out the meatballs. I like to use a scooper. And I'm going to get somewhere between 14 to 16 meatballs. It depends on the size. I'm just going to roll them in my hand into a meatball shape and place them onto my baking sheet. And then I'm just going to repeat the process for all of the meatballs. If you are new here, welcome to my channel, Simply Mama Cooks. And if you are already subscribed, maybe you might want to check the notification bell to make sure you get all of my latest videos. Okay, meatballs are done. So I'm going to start building this soup. In a preheated pan, I've added a little bit of cooking oil, and I'm going in with 1 large carrot that I cut into chunks and a small piece of celery that I also cut into chunks. You can make your cuts smaller into a dice. Here I have a little bit of onion, and I'm going to add some salt, and I'm going to saute well. I'm also going to toss in 1 dried bay leaf into the pot, and I'm going to saute this for around 10 minutes because the carrots take a long time to get tender, so I'm giving them a head start. And here's that bay leaf. So just continue the process and do this for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes of saute, I'm going to add 1½ pounds of gold potatoes. You can use russet potatoes. Honestly, I didn't really weigh the potatoes, but something like 1 pound to 1.5 pounds. I also added some salt, and I'm going to continue the saute for about 5 to 7 minutes. I also want to mention that I'm working with like a medium heat setting on the largest burner. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is create this base for the broth. I have 1 Roma tomato, I'm also working with 2 cloves of garlic, and that's going to go into my blender cup. I'm also going to be adding 1 soaked guajillo pepper. This was a dried guajillo pepper. I added 2, but I'm only going to use 1 today. And I removed the stem, seeds, and soaked it until it was soft. And I had it soaking in really hot water, by the way, and it's just been sitting on my counter. So I'm going to add that into the blender cup. Some people like to add chipotle peppers. You can definitely do that if you want spice, but I don't know. I like the flavor of the guajillo chile in this broth. So now I'm going to measure out 1 cup of that soaking liquid and add that into the blender cup. That's going to actually help everything puree when I go to, blend it up. Here I have a 1/4 teaspoon of dried Mexican oregano going in, and I also have a 1/2 teaspoon of whole cumin seeds with about 5 peppercorns that I've kind of grinded up, and I'm going to add that into the blender cup. Some people don't like the taste of cumin, so you can leave that out, but I like it. Here I have 2 tablespoons of beef bouillon powder. You could skip the bouillon powder and just opt for beef broth from the store or homemade. That also works. So now I'm just going to cover with the lid and puree well. I'm going to add it right into my pot of sautéed vegetables and aromatics. And I sort of want that to kind of cook and simmer for a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to add 6 cups of water. In total for this recipe, I'm using 7 cups of water, and that's including that soaking liquid that we used in the blender cup. I'm going to give it a good mix. I'm going to cover with a lid, and I'm going to bring this up to a boil. And once I see it boiling, I am going to lower the heat, and I'm going to let this cook for about 10 to 12 minutes. For the next ingredient, I will be using squash or zucchini. Depends on what you can find. I'm going to remove the lid, and it has been boiling and cooking for 10 minutes. It still has more cook time, but I'm doing this at different intervals or time during the cooking process because not everything's going to be able to keep its texture if I just add it all into the pot. The carrots take the longest to cook and get tender. So you'll want to taste it for salt and adjust your seasoning to your preference, whether it's salt or bouillon powder or other ingredients. Give that a mix. And now I'm going to go in with my Mexican squash or calabaza. Some people call it calabacita. I also sometimes like to add chayote and fresh sweet corn into the pot, but this is what I'm working with today. I'm going to cover with a lid, and I'm going to let this continue cooking for another 5 to 7 minutes. And all of my meatballs are done, and I'm also going to be adding fresh cilantro. A lot of you taste soap when you use cilantro. Leave it out. You don't have to add it. And sometimes I chop this up and put it into the meatballs, but I'll just throw it into the soup. Before adding the meatballs, you want to make sure that your soup is boiling. So I'm going in and I'm going to add all of my meatballs one by one. I'm going to give this a good mix, and I'm going to bring this back up to a boil and let it continue cooking until the meatballs are cooked through. It's going to take like another 12 minutes or so. So I'm going to check to see if the carrot is tender, which it is. I'm using a chopstick. I'm also checking the potato. And once these are cooked through as well, it's ready to serve. So I'm going to shut off the heat, and dinner is served. Or you could make this for lunch and have it as leftovers. It's so good the next day as well. You can garnish your bowl of soup how you prefer, but I'm digging in. I know it's going to be good. Today I'm going to show you how to make an easy Mexican style soup in the crock pot with Mexican red rice. This is going to be good. Okay, so beef caldo in my slow cooker. I'm working with somewhere between 5 to 6 pounds of beef shank. You could also use chuck roast pieces for this. Here I have a variety of vegetables. I have potatoes, like a pound, cabbage. I have onion, chayote, which is a type of Mexican squash. I have another type of Mexican squash. You could use zucchini. Here I have 2 large carrots. I have celery chopped in the middle. I'm also using 2 to 3 tablespoons of beef bouillon powder, salt, and pepper to taste. Here I have 2 cloves of garlic, a bunch of fresh cilantro, and 2 bay leaves that I'll add. And it's gonna be good. So in my crock pot, I'm adding the beef, and I'm just sort of gonna arrange it in a layer here at the bottom. I'm also gonna add whatever is left of this container of beef bouillon powder. It's somewhere between 2 to 3 tablespoons. You could start with 2 tablespoons and taste it for salt and seasoning. Here I'm adding some salt. I'm also gonna add some cracked black pepper. Here are my 2 cloves of garlic going in. You could mince that as well. I'm going to add my onion and just sort of, again, do this like in layers. By the way, I'm working with an 8-quart crock pot or slow cooker. I'm going to add the carrots. I'm also going to add the chayote, and I'll do the potatoes, the celery. It's all going in, and it's going to look like it doesn't fit in the slow cooker, but if you're working with an 8-quart crock pot or slow cooker, it'll definitely work. So I'm just going to pile all the vegetables in, and the last thing I'm going to add as far as the veggies is going to be the cabbage on top. By the way, I do have several beef or chicken caldo recipes on my channel. I will link them somewhere at the top of this video or in the description below. By the way, the ingredients and the measurements will be in the description as well. So here I'm adding all of the cabbage. And like I said, it's going to look like it's not going to fit. It will fit. Trust the process. So I'm going to arrange it and kind of mash it in there. And I'm also adding 6 cups of water. And the vegetables and the beef will render their own natural juices and water content. Here I'm adding the bay leaf. Actually, I should have added that to the bottom. So do that if you're going to make this. And here I'm going to just add the cilantro right on top. And some people do like to add guajillo chiles and puree it for the broth. You could do that or add a smidge of tomato sauce. I'm going to add the rest of that water. Like I said, in all, it's 6 cups. Add the lid. And I know it's kind of packed. And I'm going to set this to high. And it's going to take somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. Okay, so for the Mexican red rice, I have 1.5 cups of long grain rice that I rinsed in cold water. Here I'm working with like a teaspoon of ground cumin seeds with black peppercorn in the mix. I have an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce. I'm also going to be adding chicken bouillon in the mix. Here I have some fresh sliced onion, and I'll probably shake in some garlic powder. Okay, so in my preheated pan, I'm adding some cooking oil and the rice, and I'm going to toast this over a low to medium-low heat until it becomes fragrant, aromatic, and light golden in color. And take your time with this, you don't want to burn it. And I want to mention, a lot of you make Mexican red rice at home. If you don't want to rinse your rice, you don't have to. I can't control how you cook in your kitchen, but this is just something I do. And I think a lot of people do. It removes the extra starch. Okay, here I'm adding my fresh onion. I want those to sort of go along with the toasting rice. It does make the ingredients in the pan very aromatic with that fresh onion. I like it. And here I'm going to shake in the ground cumin seeds and black peppercorn. And the amount for that is up to you. You can go with a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin, a 1/2 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. It all works. So now I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of chicken bouillon powder. And I'm going to quickly just combine this. I'm really not cooking it. I just want it to sort of combine and disperse throughout the pan. Now for the tomato sauce. Carefully, by the way, because it does start to pop and splatter. Give that a mix. And I'm just going to let that mix and simmer or sizzle quickly. I don't want it to burn, but I want it to sort of coat the rice. And now this is something I love to do, but if you don't have this particular can of tomato sauce, it's really 3 cups of water going in, but I'm going to use this can as a measurement. So 1, here's the second, 2, and 3. 3 cups of water going in. And you could add minced fresh garlic. I am going to go with garlic powder, somewhere between a half teaspoon to a full teaspoon. It really depends on how much garlic you want in here. I'm just going to eyeball things today. I'm going to quickly mix that. And I'm going to cover this with a lid to bring it up to a simmer or a boil. And once it looks like this is perfect, by the way, don't lift the lid. I'm going to lower the heat, and you're going to let this simmer with the lid on for about 18 minutes or so. Okay, so it has been close to 4 hours. By the way, the cook time varies, especially if you're working with cold meat. That'll make things take longer. But I didn't have corn on the cob, so I'm going to add a drained can of corn in the last hour of cook time. So like I said, it's somewhere between 3.5 to 4 hours at this point. And I also want to show you, I have skimmed off a lot of the fat that rendered on the top. So I'm just going to shake in this can of corn. I'm going to give it a mix and let it continue cooking until the meat is tender. In all, it's probably going to take 4.5 to 5 hours for the meat to get tender. And by the time that the meat is tender, everything else will be cooked through. Oh, looks so good. I also want to mention, if you want to taste the broth at this point, because everything's cooked, you're essentially waiting for the meat to get tender, you can taste it for salt or seasoning and adjust this to your preference. Taste buds are funny that way, so what I may find as salty, you might think it needs more salt. It really is up to you. Okay, so my rice is done, and I'm not going to remove the lid. I am going to just set it to the side with the lid on for about 10 to 15 minutes, just to let it sit. So my caldo is ready, and I'm going to serve a bowl. Look at this. It smells amazing in my kitchen, and I love to make caldos in the slow cooker. I don't know. I have the time to do it. I'm at home. I don't have to stand over the stove and stir things. And if you're cooking this on low, you can do this for about 8-9 hour cooking process. So if you have to do things throughout the day and you want to come home to dinner made in the slow cooker, it totally works. And at this point, my rice is ready, so I'm just going to scoop that and place it right into the bowl. And I don't know, maybe try not to make a mess like I am. Okay, so at this point, you can squeeze fresh lime juice right into the bowl, served with hot corn tortillas on the side, and dinner is ready. So I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.